And you may have said to yourself, who the hell is Kid Millions? So here we are, my old friend, John Colpitz, the man behind the moniker. Please give a warm round of applause for JW. Tell us a little bit about Oneida, because I mean, I know you guys. And
Well, Oneida started in 1997. We started in Brooklyn. Back then, as Phil can testify, rock and roll in New York City was like pretty non-existent in a way. The cool thing in New York City at the time was something called ambient. Have you ever heard of that? Okay.
it's like ambient, but it was ill.
It was like a form of DJ music that was super chill. And so the parties that people were having would consist of people lying around on the floor listening to super chill music. It was like really not the kind of stuff that we were into, for sure. We both ended up at the Knitting Factory, which is a venue that still exists, but not in an interesting way, maybe.
Now it has like football parties and stuff. Nothing. Why don't you tell them like what the Knitting Factory was when we showed up there in the mid-90s?
Definitely. The Knitting Factory was kind of ground zero for experimental, I'd say, improvisation and jazz in New York City. The so-called downtown scene, you know, I guess John Zorn would be the kind of top of the heap of that world. And yeah.
Jazz, I mean,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
all kinds of stuff. It was a club that started on Houston Street. It was a guy from Madison, Michael Dorff, who now owns City Winery. And very quickly, the Knitting Factory, in part because, and Michael would admit this, that he didn't know what the heck he was doing. He just wanted to, he had a little record label, and there was this band called Swamp Thing from Madison that was like a thing in College Town, and he started this label and wanted to have a place. And Wayne Horvitz, of all people, reached out to him trying to get a gig there and saw that Michael didn't know what he was doing and was open to suggestions. So he said, I've got a ton of friends that want to play. And pretty soon, everybody was playing there, from Christian Marclay to Elliot Sharp to John Zorn to, just on and on. Within a few years, the club became like this international sensation. I ended up working there. It moved to Leonard Street and became 3-story venue. There was the main stage, there was the alternate theater, and then later on there was what was the office when we were there, which very creatively became the old office, which was another venue. So you had 3 floors of entertainment 7 nights a week. Everybody from Dave Holland, Anthony Braxton, Steve Lacy, to They Might Be Giants, and to Yola Tango, and Sonic Youth, all kinds of. It was really like no genre, just anything new and experimental and cutting edge. And John and I met there, and it's kind of hard to state what. To understand now what that club meant at the time. It really was like a beacon that everybody was there. You just would hang out and would meet people. Like, so anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's how we ended up there. I mean, I went to school in Vermont, and Phil, you probably know, is from Florida, and we just heard of this place, the Knitting Factory, and we ended up there. I guess. Real quick, yeah, so Oneida started quickly after I left the venue, and there was really no rock and roll or experimental heavy music in the city at the time. So we were super outsiders. Also, we lived in Brooklyn, which was, I mean, it may be hard to imagine now, but it was incredibly like uncool to be from Brooklyn. I started the band because I just really wanted to play music. I think maybe it might be more interesting to kind of talk about the context of, I guess, how I came to the point of wanting to start this band. I went to college in Vermont in a school called Middlebury. I didn't study music. I really loved music. I worked at the radio station. I played constantly, but I didn't have anybody telling me that this was a viable career option. I didn't go to school for it, so I would say right away, you guys are lucky, and it's amazing that you're getting this education. I wish I did. But anyway, so that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to move to New York, and I'm just going to work at this club, the Knitting Factory. It's super cool. Everybody who's doing anything cutting edge is playing there. So I'll just go there and see if I can work there. Turns out I got a job, and I started booking tours for bands, and all the while playing, but never thinking like, okay, this is viable.
And you worked with one of our guests earlier this semester, Dave Douglas.
Yep. Yes, I booked Dave's tour. I worked for Dave for a brief period of time after I left the Knitting Factory. But I was just kind of exploring the music business. I thought, okay, I can't play music, but maybe I can be close to music. And that, I guess that quickly, it became clear that wasn't really the right path for me. But I had to kind of realize that, okay, yeah, it's okay for me to play music. I booked the club, and I would see night after night of really, great musicians, and some like really not so great musicians, do their thing, and most of the time nobody came to the club. Most of the time these people didn't have much of an audience, and I thought, well, okay, why wouldn't that be me? If nobody comes to see these guys, well, maybe it's fine that nobody would come to see me play. So that was kind of my start, and I realized, I was talking to Phil earlier, one of the first things I understood once I was really entrenched in the music venue world was that nobody cares. Nobody cares about your music. Nobody gives a shit about what you're doing. They don't care if you practice. They don't care if you do practice. Or if you don't practice. They don't care if you record a record, and they don't care if you play a show. And initially, maybe that sounds like really harsh and really negative, but it gave me like a huge leg up, I feel, in terms of perspective about what a career in creative music actually means. It means that, the foundation of it is that nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit. And they won't. So that, I felt, it liberated me. The backstory is that I spent, 17 years working day jobs to kind of make it happen. And I would say that I was talking to my girlfriend. I was out, having dinner recently, and somebody was sitting near us and overheard me talking, and they said, "Oh, hey, so you're a full-time musician? Like, that's what you do?" And I was like, "Yeah." Yeah. And they said, "Oh, well, so how long did it take for you to get to that point?" And I thought, okay, yeah, it took me 17 years of being in New York City playing music. It's a business, unfortunately, in this country. So you just need, the only thing that registers for people is getting bodies in the room, right? So I just had an awareness of that. And I didn't let that change the music that I made, but I just knew what the, currency of what I did.
Well, because in a way, if nobody cares, then you're free to do whatever the hell you want.
For sure. And I think that's also important. And in a creative sense, that's really important. On a just practical business sense, day to day, you have an awareness that, okay, it humbles you, you know. I don't have something to offer this person right now. So if they're willing to put me on to do a show, I know that most likely nobody's going to come to this show. That's okay. It shouldn't derail you from what you're trying to do.
Because what John is doing is not easily classifiable. Can we just name some of the projects that you're part of?
Oh yeah, totally. I have to do so many different things. So I do improvisation, like I play drums with different people. Like Laurie Anderson, Jay Spaceman, from Spiritualized. I don't know if you've heard of that, but I play with a saxophonist, and then
from Borbido Magus, right?
Yeah, so
Jim Sauter.
Yeah, Jim Sauter from a old New York noise band. So I do that. That's a little thing. It generates a little bit of income. Then I have Oneida, which pays for my studio space, thankfully. And then there is this group called Man Forever, which is kind of a drum ensemble that's a compositional vehicle for me. Every opportunity that I've been given, I've tried to explode it a bit. I just want to emphasize, you have to think like a few steps ahead. It's like a chess game.
Did I just use that metaphor the other day, Kat?
All right.
It's so funny.
What's painful about listening to stuff you've recorded is that process of feeling like, oh, you know, I really should have practiced that little, you know, pattern, like just a little bit more, or you can hear all the flaws. And so it's really important for me, and it should be important for you, to create your music, make it, do it, and maybe agonize about it after it's been released instead of being really precious about it before anyone's heard it. You know, and you can be working on your next thing, and you can learn something from what you did before, versus, you know, being like, I don't know, My Bloody Valentine. Do you guys know this band? They spent 15, 20 years making their next album. Who cares? Maybe it's an okay record, but
right.
It's idiocy.
What I like about this this kind of object lesson here is the kind of punk rock attitude that you can take. It doesn't matter what style of music you play. So percussion guys are not punk rockers, but the idea behind it is, let's just do it. Nobody cares if we put it out or we don't put it out. Let's just put it out. Nobody cares if it's perfect or not perfect. Nobody's going to sit there and go, boy, I don't know, there's a little dodgy intonation in that passage. And maybe they will, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because you will continue to grow and continue to move on to the next thing. And, you know, if you wait, you know, nobody cares that you wait either, right? So the best thing to do is just be like a shark and moving forward all the time. For me, the takeaway here is be thinking long term. We've talked before about making relationships and quote-unquote networking. It isn't about, hey, I met this booker. Can you give me a show next week? I mean, sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's about making a relationship with somebody and letting them know what you do. You know what they do. You guys are bound together by a mutual interest in music. A lot of people will be receptive and open-minded to you, like this manager person was to John. Did he say, I'm going to make a lot of money from this guy, this drummer guy? No. He just said, you never know what's going to happen. And there will be a lot of people, because in this industry, anybody who's been around for a minute will see that all kinds of unintended, interesting consequences happen. So those people who have been around a long time, my experience is that they remain open to meeting new people and just seeing what happens, because you just never know. So but the point is that you've got to put yourself out there. Even though you're nervous about your playing and you don't feel that confident in it, how do you find the kind of courage to do it anyway?
Wow, That's such a good question. Well, I think you just have to find that place within yourself that isn't listening to the critical side. I mean, I assume that most of us really have a lot of fun playing music. You know, you finish a jam and you feel good. And I would say, no matter what emotional content happened during that performance, whether you felt lost or ecstatic or whatever, at the end of it, you feel enervated and alive. So I would say that's probably what drives me.
What keeps you going?
Yeah, and that's what keeps me practicing too. To just be able to make sure, okay, I'm ready. I'm as ready as I can be tonight.
Do you think you're better now than you were 15 years ago, or?
I think people ask that, and sometimes I think I'm no better, but I don't know.
Well, I just asked because I've talked to some students here that I feel like they want to wait until they get better to play. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Because they don't want to embarrass themselves or go up on stage and suck really bad or whatever, or people don't like it. Does that resound with anybody? Does anybody here feel that way? Can I get a show of hands?
Let me speak to that. So I would say those feelings are the result, and I don't want to make too many assumptions because I'm sure there's a lot of great energy here. But I would say that is a byproduct of being in the academy. I would say you are judged daily here. And there is some kind of value, intrinsic value placed on your technique and your practice and what you do in front of your peers and your teachers. And I think there's certainly, you have to have some level of self-criticism. It's useful. But at the end of the day, that's a lot of stuff that you need to just shed. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You have to become, if you want to have go on a creative path and find your own voice and get there, you must step away from the critical voice. It's really not useful in the world at large. When you walk out of the new school doors, that critical voice is not going to help you do what you want to do.
Maybe it'll help you in the practice room, but when it's time to hit the stage, just chuck it.
Yeah. And I would say don't wait to book that first show. I mean, for Oneida, we were so not ready to play. So not ready. You should hear the first record. I hope you don't hear the first record. It's awful. And the first tour, we played every night for 2.5 months all over the country. And by the time we got back home, we were actually, functional as a band. It was like, oh wow, okay, this really works. But it took time. You never get ready in the practice room anyway. It never happens that way. I don't think I'm ready to play with Laurie Anderson. But I did. I said, okay, fuck it. This is real. I'm gonna do it.
I'm interested in this obviously musically, but also because it touches on something that I think maybe when we were both at the Knitting Factory, maybe we thought if we were going to play music, we would want to play some kind of new jazz or something maybe, right? And in fact, when we were together at the Knitting Factory in 1996, they had a festival called What is Jazz and tried to answer that. And it was a really good festival. But I guess what I mean is I just kind of want to put my finger on this gap between the expectations of what maybe you think you're supposed to be doing and what it is that you really are good at doing and like doing. I guess what I mean is just because you're at a jazz school doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become a jazz musician. Even though you're studying jazz and the study of it I wholly support and I think it gives you a great framework and skill and foundation to approach any kind of music you want. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that it may be that you won't end up playing that kind of music, and if you do, that's great. But maybe you can allow yourself to be free to do something totally different.
Well, I mean, there's so many like levels to that. You know, we have to make a living. So I would say you could think creatively about that and not feel ashamed at having a so-called day job, and doing the music that you truly are passionate about when you can, which is should be every day, but you have another way of supporting yourself. And I mean, that's what I did for so long. So it was the right path for me. Yeah, you guys are being trained in a certain way. So really, I think you need to feel open to where your talents and gifts take you and where they resonate with people. If people are asking you to play, you know, reggae gigs and you really love reggae and it's looked down on by your peers, I mean, you can certainly say, well, this is great. I love this music. Is that what you mean, or?
I guess I mean just figuring out who you are as an artist. It may not be who you think you're supposed to be.
That takes time, and I wouldn't get anxious about who you are as a musician. I wouldn't be anxious about it. I didn't realize it wasn't until like about 8 years into Oneida's career that I thought, oh wow, okay, I've made a lot of music, and I have this style of playing drums that's unique, that I built out of playing with these people. But I didn't know that. But it took. But I could look back, and then after 15 years in the band, I looked back and said, wow, okay, we have 25 releases. Like all of a sudden, like okay, we did something. But it just took. You had to just move forward and do it.
Can we talk take it all the way down to the ground and talk about the mix of things you're doing to make money? Can we do that?
Sure, yeah.
What are some of the different things you do now to make money?
Okay, so, well, there's the income from shows. I try to target like big events and leverage some of my relationships into bigger events. So I played at NYU last month with Jay Spaceman and the Joshua Light Show, which is a psychedelic light show, historic. It's been around since the 60s. And that was a big ticket event, and I got paid. So that helped. And then I've been a drummer for hire, like a session drummer, and I played drums with Spiritualized, and I got paid to just be a drummer. I write, for money a little bit, like
commission type stuff?
No, I do that too, but I mean just actual like articles and stuff.
Oh, words, right?
Yeah. So I write for this website called the Talk House, and it's musicians talking about.
Has anybody
music.
seen this website, Talk House? It's really great. There's
cool.
a lot of really cool articles in there. It's by musicians. It's about music. It's super interesting.
So they pay a very little bit, but I make sure that I only spend a certain amount of time in the article, so it makes it, worthwhile. Then through record sales, a very small amount. I mean, that's, and
Publishing? Do you get any?
Publishing? Yes. I don't. That's a whole nother thing, but I have gotten paid through that. But yeah, it's like gig income.
Mostly live. then?
Mostly live and commissions. I've gotten some commissions, so it's just like, I mean, it's really hard. It's not. I'm not well off in the least. I make so much less money than I did when I had a real job, but I paid the bills. You know, like, you know.
Is it worth it? Making, making the
sure.
less. Tell us what you did before to support yourself.
Sure.
Because one of the things that's good to think about is how you can find some kind of gig that's going to keep you together and able to do creative work without stressing. Because the whole starving artist idea is bullshit. That because you can't get work done if you can't keep yourself together. You don't have a place. You don't have any money.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So. Since I left the knitting factory, I moved art, which I don't recommend. I would not recommend being a mover. But I did that. I worked as a temp on Wall Street, which is really brutal, like in terms of there's nothing to do. You just sit there. I don't know what it's like now. Then I transitioned. When I was 30, I thought, wow, I don't have any kind of career. This is getting scary. And I got a opportunity to work in IT for a friend of mine's company. And so I took a pay cut and went and joined this company, and I worked there for 10 years. I became a manager at an IT company. So
it was like a 9-to-5 gig?
Yeah, it was it was a real job, but I mean I did music every night. And then what was happening was I was getting offers that I had to turn down in music, and I thought, okay.
Like, what's the offer you had to turn down? That was really
I had to go. I was offered to go to Australia with the Boredoms. Do you know the Boredoms?
Does anybody know the Boredoms? Japanese noise band.
And I said I turned it down, and I was like, this is not okay. I need to be able to do these things, and so at that moment. For the next year, I planned on getting out of that career, and so now I'm 42. So that's what it took for me.
But I mean, the thing is that it did work out, and you guys might not have heard of Oneida, but they do have an audience, and we were only kind of scratched the surface of the different kind of varied, really interesting and exciting musical things that John's been involved with. But how did you manage the growth of the band? Because I feel like it's a mental trick to play on yourself to say that nobody cares, because then you're not upset by that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it was growing. So
for sure. Well, it is a trick. It's just like a contract you enter into with yourself. It's just it just gives you space. I mean, it's like we were focused on just creating work, right? Making recordings, making records. I mean, I don't know. I still think a recorded album is important even now. I think it's still the medium of exchange. So.
So not just like SoundCloud stream.
I mean,
something?
I don't know. I'm sorry, but I think it's still valid. Just useful for you if you're a writer, something, you finish something, it's done, you can put it aside and work on something else. And I think really when we started Oneida, we had never made a record. But we saw like the examples, like we took like James Brown as an example. We would see like, oh my God, he made 4 albums in 1967 or something, and they're all incredible. Okay, like this is our model. I mean, it's like, you have to have absurd, goals, I would say. There's probably stuff I'm forgetting. But
that's okay. I guess I'm just kind of interested in this process by which things kind of like divide and then become their own identity, and this spin-off notion of one band, and then a part comes out, and you make a document, a record, and you tour it, and now it's a thing.
Sure.
It's not just an idea.
Yeah.
Is that like, forgive my marketing speak, but is that like an extension of the brand?
Huh.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure. I mean, I think I look at it more like any opportunity I see for like a home for a recording, I will go and seek it. I've really cultivated relationships with labels over the last 20 years. I mean, it's just part of like what you do in a day. I spend the first, say, 4 or 5 hours of my day doing what I call admin. It's got nothing to do with playing. It's just me writing to people or having a meeting or talking to people on the phone, checking in with labels. There's just something about it that's where you feel like a little bit of control. I mean, it's a very, very scary way to live. So, you know, there's only a few things you can control, right? You know, you can always put the time in to your practice, to your discipline, reaching out to people, not getting like injured or personally hurt by, you know, the myriad of rejections that you're going to receive, you know, that, yeah.
So, walk us through a little bit like how you would pitch. You've got a new project, People of the North.
Okay.
That
well, I can actually,
nobody knows this band.
Yeah.
You've never played. No one's bought the records. But how you're going to get a show anyway? How do you do that?
Okay.
What do you say to the booker that's going to make them listen?
Well,
because that's a problem that I know a lot of people here have. They have a band, they want to get a gig, but they can't get a gig because they've never had a gig. They can't say, I have this X number of people that are going to be there.
Right. Well, I would actually circle around the question a little bit, because I would say when Oneida started, we couldn't get a gig anywhere. We couldn't even get a gig at the knitting factory where like we worked. So we actually saw an opportunity to play shows, like more do-it-yourself DIY shows. There were people that we had met who had, say, a gallery, and we pitched, can we do a show? We'll buy a keg of beer. It'll be free beer, and Oneida will play, with another band. And the people said, sure, and we just kind of created our own shows. And I would say that would be the first thing to do. I mean, that's a DIY path, and I don't know if it's for everyone. And it's what I did, and I really ascribe to it. But it's a lot of work. I feel like you get to learn how this business operates, and I think that is really valuable. I spend a lot of energy reading about the business and learning about the business, every aspect. Putting out records, touring, booking shows, all that stuff. And it all came in handy. I would say if you've never played a show, get a show anywhere. Maybe you're not going to be able to play. I don't know what the target venue would be for you guys. I actually don't know. But I would say, yeah.
Dizzy's? Did somebody say Dizzy's?
Dizzy's. Okay, Dizzy's.
Okay.
You would never, that's crazy. And I think that's awesome. It's an aspiration. But I would say it wasn't until Oneida released 4 records, that I could really, I could get a response from a club when I wrote to them or called them. So maybe that means that the music is bad, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's just the way it is. And so we still played lots of shows, and they were all in the whole thing about Williamsburg now, and our friend who stepped out for a sec, who's talked about this place, Death by Audio, that was like how shows happened back in the 90s. That was all there was in Brooklyn.
Yeah, there were no venues.
Yeah,
there was no real clubs at the time.
So I would say, there's a lot of value to learning about how this stuff works. If you're truly, if it's a path you want to follow, there is never a waste of energy trying to learn about how this stuff works on a practical business level.
Can you give some tips, having
Sure.
been on both sides?
Sure,
You've been
sure,
the guy who writes the club who ignores you, and you've been the guy maybe you've ignored people.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing
I tried
personal.
not to, but
Yeah, but
yeah. Oh, one thing I did want to say is don't ascribe intention to events that have nothing to do with you. So yeah, as Phil said, don't take it personally that this club doesn't answer you. Don't get a chip on your shoulder. I mean, that's kind of the worst. Try to avoid that. But anyway, okay. So the first thing to do would be have a decent recording. Have something that really sounds great and that is not precious. Like you don't start the recording with 5 minutes of like experimental noise or whatever. Just start the demo with the absolute best music that you have. Put it up on SoundCloud, and then kind of go to the venue that you want to play at. I mean, I don't know Dizzy's, so I wouldn't. Maybe that was a joke. I don't know, but
no.
Okay.
But yeah, you should go there.
Yeah,
and
okay.
then what?
Okay, go to Dizzy's, see some shows, meet the door person, meet the bartender, ask about booking.
Ask who books the place, and are they there?
Are they there? Say hello, chat with them, whatever. I would say the so-called networking thing is really like just about meeting people and not to look at it in a mercenary way, but to look at it in an expansive way. You want to do music, and you want to meet these other people that play music. The booking guy probably really loves music. It's a nightmare to book a club, but he or she probably really loves music. So connect with them on that level, and maybe they'll just be like, "Dude, go away." But you've made a connection, and you can come back. If you truly want to play this venue, you should be there a lot. You should meet them, everybody involved, and then slowly you actually find out what's going on. Maybe one night one of your friends is playing bass in one of the groups, and you can be like, "Hey, how did this gig happen?" Well, talk to the band leader. So then you can be like, "Hey man, can I take you out to lunch, and can you just tell me like,"
or even, "Hey, can I buy you a beer?" It doesn't
right, or whatever. Like how did you get a gig here? And it's probably, I mean, but yeah, the recording is important, and being sensitive to the fact that, as I said, the mantra is nobody cares. Nobody cares about your art. Just make it really impactful and hook a person. Make it worthwhile. Gives them a reason for them to actually click on a link.
You had some big picture kind of things that you wanted to talk about. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, one thing that you may have heard this before, but something that I learned pretty early on, and I think it's still pretty valuable and valid, especially when you're starting out and just kind of getting your feet wet, is that I feel like talent is very overrated. I don't know how, it's not, and it's really good to keep that in mind. I saw this speech when I was in high school or college, and it was by a writer, a published author, had a lot of books published, and he said, when I was in school, I was not the best writer in my class by any stretch, but I was the only one in my class that kept doing it and kept working at it. And I would say the same applies in music. I do not have the talent that many, many, many people I've come across over the years have. I just don't have it, you know? But the path of being a creative musician just takes a lot of work, and that's something I can do. I can apply myself 10, 12 hours a day on that task and make up for the lack of talent I have as a musician or a composer or anything. So I would say that's something to really keep in mind. You may have, there may be students here that are just insane, incredible players, but, there may be issues that they struggle with personally that keep them from being able to do the gig. They're too insecure about their playing or something. So I just wanted to make that point. It's a humbling thing because I have seen musicians that focus a lot of energy on being angry and really angry at the system and the fact that they're not recognized, and they do so much work and they spend so much energy on it and they're never recognized. And there's a lot of energy that they put into being mad about it. And I'm not sure that's useful energy to spend. So I would say, well, one thing I would really encourage people to do is, there's a couple of books that I found really useful. I don't know if you've heard of The Artist Way. Has anyone heard of this book? It's a bit corny at times, so you have to take it. The Artist's Way.
My wife loves that book, by the way.
Okay.
Debbie loves that book.
Okay.
It's around the house.
It's a bit corny, so you have to, okay. There's that book, and then there's a book called The War of Art, which I really liked a lot too. It's funny. No, but no. So you need strategies in place in order to manage the pain that you would take on for being rejected. I would say it's quite real, and I go through it. I actually, when I have drum students, I really focus on some things that maybe are easily dismissed, but things like getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising, not getting drawn into the lifestyle, the so-called lifestyle of the musician that you might see in the media, which would be somebody who is really indulgent of drugs and alcohol.
And out all night, every night.
Yeah, I know this makes me sound a bit puritanical, and I actually don't have anything against those things, but I had to make a choice when I went full-time and I hope you guys can do it much earlier than I did, but when I went full-time, music is the priority. It becomes a priority, so I can't, compromise myself because I need to drink 5 drinks, 10 drinks at the show. You know what I mean? So
well, because one of the things that if you haven't toured much, you may not realize. You may say, "Well, I'm not an alcoholic, so that's not a problem." But the thing is, when you're on tour, there's constantly free booze around all the time. It's in your rider. There's a case of beer, there's a bottle of booze, there's a bottle of wine, and it just very easy to have a drink at sound check, have a drink after sound check, have a drink at dinner, have a drink before the show, have a drink after the show, have a beer during the show. Next thing you know, you've had 6, 7 drinks every night, and you're not even thinking about it. You don't even feel like you're drunk.
I would say as a musician, and there's a lot of sexism and racism that you have to, not for me. I'm just saying, these are things that will hurt and exist in the world and in music, and especially in music. And you need tools to be able to process the stuff and not let it hurt you, and knock you off your path. The energy you spend focusing on it or redirecting it to yourself and being I'm not good enough, I'm not Charlie Parker, or I'm not, John Coltrane. We never will be. It's not really a useful comparison. You are you, and you just have to like put into the equation that you're going to be rejected like constantly for years. You know, I mean, the other day I got a shitty review that said I was not a good drummer. And I happened to read it, and it hurt. And I was like, wow, this sucks. I don't think it's true, but I had to kind of, you know, okay, process this and think about it and not let it like become a little seed in my mind that like grows and affects me creatively down the line. All that shit really affects you. But I had to kind of, you know, okay, process this and think about it and not let it like become a little seed in my mind that like grows and affects me creatively down the line. All that shit really affects you. So, yeah.
I have a question. I wanted to ask you about Kid Millions. How did this name come about? Because I actually thought it was kind of interesting. You know what happened this week? A bunch of people, faculty, students came up to me and they said, Phil, who is Kid Millions? What is he going to do? This is so... And I thought it was great because people were interested. Oh. They didn't know you, but they saw that name and they saw the picture and they thought, they were intrigued enough to come and ask me about it.
I would say that goes back to just like a persona that you would inhabit as a performer that may not, well, like, okay, you guys are in jazz school, Sun Ra, right? So I would say it's an acknowledgement of the persona that you inhabit on stage, and maybe that you inhabit as you navigate your life in music. So you could ascribe certain characteristics of yourself to this persona that you would want amplified or sublimated. When I started, I wasn't comfortable with ascribing what I did musically to my birth name. It didn't really, actually I didn't get much encouragement in music in that realm. So, and I think I was also pretty insecure on the road, and I felt like, you know, I wanted to just have this persona where I could just talk to people. I don't know if it did anything, but it's also, you know, memorable. People remember it. So, you know, on a practical level, it's useful too.
But is it freeing on stage? Do you feel like, is it a mask that you can hide behind and feel like you're presenting that? And yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I never thought of that. Yeah, I mean,
that shields you a little bit from the they don't care, they're not interested.
Maybe. I mean, people would oftentimes they would want to like tear you down. They would want to tear me down and be like, "What's your real name? Why are you that name?" And you kind of like recognize like people's like own insecurities are like coming out when they're trying to like, how would you dare to name yourself? You know, like it's interesting.
Yeah, because you're not Kid Millions. It's so presumptuous. Not Kid Hundreds,
right?
Or Kid Thousands.
I mean,
you're Kid Millions.
But you know, it's just like it was really useful to separate my private self from that. It's getting more blurry now, but I don't know. I think it really worked for me. It works for a lot of people.
JW, John, Kid Millions, thank you so much. Please give a warm round of applause.
Thank you. And if people think they have questions like later, they can get my info from Phil, and feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk.